Yeah,
maybe
it'll
buy
look
a
for a
ticket
change.
Buy a ticket tomorrow night.
Minister, the Forza Trade Union have launched a campaign to introduce the 4-day week. It's something that people on the left, trade unionists and socialists, have argued for a long time would be a good measure, but I think it's even more appropriate that it's something that should be considered at the moment, given the pandemic, the huge numbers of people who have lost their jobs, that we would consider introducing a 4-day week. So I'd like to hear what your response is to that proposal.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I'm aware of the 4-day week campaign led by Forza, ICTU and other civil society groups. I think many of the implications of this proposal need to be carefully considered for the entire labour force, not just in the public service. Indeed, any movement by the public service in isolation could have serious consequences for small and medium businesses already struggling in the face of COVID. But dealing with the public services, as you have asked, I would first like to make the point the state is already a good employer that offers staff considerable flexibility through the availability of, amongst other things, work sharing, flexible working hours, shorter working years, career breaks and now remote working as well. And in my role as Minister, I have to ensure that quality public services are delivered to the Irish people in a manner that delivers value for money to the taxpayer. For the public service, there are two core issues associated with any transition to a 4-day week. First, the cost to the taxpayer, and second, ensuring continuity of services to the public. In relation to the cost, estimating the full exchequer cost of the proposal would be extremely complex, as it would encompass over 342,000 public servants across nearly 200 organisations. At a very high level, paying people for 4 days but providing services to the citizen over 5 and in some cases 7 days would add at least a fifth to the current pay bill of approximately €20 billion. That equates to an extra €4 billion that would have to be found to deliver the same level of services. In reality, an extra €4 billion is probably a conservative estimate, as gaps would likely be filled through overtime payments and additional cover from agency staffing, both of which come at a considerable premium. It's unclear how increased productivity alone could offset the cost in the context of keeping essential services open. And then there are very practical issues that would arise, for Gardaí, members of the fire brigade, nurses in hospitals and so on, operating on a 4-day week. And I can go into that in a moment. Thank you.
When I was studying geography at school, amazingly, I don't know if people remember this, in the geography book it used to say that by the time we got to about now, 2020s, that the biggest problem society would have is that because of technological advance, we'd all be working maybe even a 3-day week, and we'd be trying to figure out things to do at all our leisure time, because technology would confer such benefit in terms of labour saving and increased productivity. Now, we got all the increased productivity, but instead of it actually improving the quality of life of workers, the opposite has happened. And we even had, as part of the austerity programme, the infamous Lansdowne Road hours, actually adding hours rather than reducing them. I don't accept that you'd see a fall off in services, because in fact countries that do have shorter working weeks have higher levels of productivity. A happier workforce, a workforce that has a better quality of life, is actually a more productive workforce. So I think you're wrong in your argument.
Would you be advocating that for politicians as well?
Sure, we're only working, what is it, 3 days in here?
Minister?
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy. And I'm not sure if you're advocating that people would work for 4 days and be paid for 5, or would work for 4 days and be paid for 4. I'm not sure which you're advocating, but there are very real consequences for key parts of our public service. If you take teachers, for example, you're suggesting that schools would only open for 4 days in the week and not for 5, and think about the implications that would create for families and childcare issues and so on like that. And in terms of other frontline services, Gardaí, members of the fire service, nurses, doctors, exactly how that would work in practice, I'm not at all clear on. And I think there should be an acknowledgement that the state is a really good employer, and I gave you the examples: the shorter working year, work sharing, flexi time, career breaks, and now increasingly, and I think it's a feature that's here to stay, remote working, and that is an ambition in the programme for government to deliver that for us.
First of all, many public servants are earning less than they were even now, 10 years after austerity. They haven't got their pay restored, and they're working longer hours. Think about our nurses. They're overrun, underpaid, and we've got pay apartheid. Similarly for our teachers. We've pay apartheid even for the service officers and ushers here in the Dáil. You get paid different rates depending on when you came into the place. I wouldn't be lauding the treatment of public servants. Some maybe are very well paid and well treated, but others not so. But that's a somewhat separate argument, and of course there are complexities and nuances to a 4-day week, but it's about establishing the basic principle. You know, once upon a time the weekend was considered impossible. There was no such thing as a weekend. But then we got a weekend because people fought for it, and actually society was better and the economy was better for it. So the very same principle can apply to the 4-day week.
Thank you,
and no,
Minister,
it isn't about cutting people's pay,
thank you very
just to
much.
stress
Minister,
that.
to conclude on this matter, please.
Well, I wouldn't like to accuse you of trying to cut people's pay, Deputy, but you know, you put the question in the context of the public service only, and I think this issue has to be examined in the round for the private sector as well. I'm sure you're not suggesting one treatment for public servants, whereas people working in shops, in factories, in offices would continue to work a 5-day week.
Please, Deputy, can we let the Minister answer? Minister, if you could deal with the
I think we would still have taken the question, Deputy. And you know, but there are. You said there are nuances and complexities. Well, I mean, there are very real ones. I gave you the example of schools. You know, are you suggesting that they would only open for 4 days a week? So, you know, it's this is an issue that, you know, I think would benefit from social dialogue. I think we do need to put a new structure in place to facilitate full dialogue involving civic society with employers, the public service, the unions and other important stakeholders too.